This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Prisons set ablaze in Nigeria's Lagos state as authorities enforce a round-the-clock curfew. The WHO says speedy testing could be a game changer in Africa's war against COVID-19. And the UN warns of serious challenges in the Horn of Africa as locust swarms expected to build up afresh. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague Uche, who has our business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up later on Africa Live Biz. South Africa's power outages are expected to persist until 2021. And Ghana says that structures have been put in place to take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. I'm Richard Nta. So good to have you with us. Let's begin in Nigeria, where gunshots could be heard Thursday as smoke billowed over a prison in central Lagos in the upscale Ikoyi neighborhood. It was not immediately clear who attacked the prison facility. The incident comes amid 2 weeks of widespread protests against police brutality. Some protesters broke round-the-clock curfews imposed on Tuesday after soldiers were accused of opening fire on protesters in Lagos. Nigeria's Vice President Yemi Osinbajo said his heart goes out to people who lost their lives in the past several days of turmoil. On Wednesday, Television Continental's building went up in flames after youth stormed the premises and set it ablaze. The private television station is believed by many to be owned by Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He is a former governor of Lagos State. Smoke could still be seen hanging over the sprawling city of 20 million people on Thursday while schools and shops were still shut under the curfew. Now, the African Union and regional bloc, ECOWAS, have urged the Nigerian government and the protesters to pursue dialogue for early and an amicable resolution of the protest. Staying in Nigeria, police report 20 people have been killed by a group of gunmen in Zamfara state. The attack took place in Tongar Kwana village in northwestern Nigeria. A police spokesperson said bandits targeted residents who they suspect are informants for security agencies in the area. Last week, information provided by villagers helped security troops locate some of the bandits. Security forces have launched a hunt to arrest illegal gunmen in the area and bring them to justice. Well, here in Kenya, a court has ordered an investigation into the abduction of an acquitted terror suspect. Liban Abdullahi Omar went missing after he was found not guilty of supporting the 2013 Westgate shopping mall attack. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy reports.
He's acquitted under Section 215.
Liban Abdullahi Omar, one of the Westgate terror suspects, was abducted over 2 weeks ago, a day after he was acquitted of all charges relating to the attack that left 67 people dead. Witnesses say he was taken by a known gunman in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. His abduction and disappearance was brought to the attention of the magistrate presiding over the terror case.
If at all this incident is true, then I think it is time that the issue is taken up by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights for investigations on the truth or otherwise.
The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights is the statutory body charged with monitoring human rights violations and compliance in the country. Our court says the abduction and disappearance of suspects sets a bad precedent, but also risks the lives of those on the prosecution bench and the defense. Omar's lawyers say many suspects accused of offenses related to terrorism are abducted and never found again after their release.
I'm urging the investigators to go to the root and find out what is happening, even as the Kenya National Commission of Human Rights, if it accepts, takes up this matter, because it is not a matter that I think should be taken lightly.
Omar was one of 3 suspects connected to the Westgate attack. He was acquitted due to lack of evidence against him. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
The World Health Organization said the rollout of new rapid diagnostic tests could be a game changer in Africa's fight against the coronavirus. While infections have plateaued in most countries on the continent, the virus is still a threat to humans. The WHO aims to provide better testing access to areas where it's harder to reach. Last month, the WHO and partners agreed to roll out 120 million RDTs for COVID-19 to help lower and middle-income countries.
African countries are gearing up to introduce antigen-based rapid diagnostic tests on a large scale. And this will be a game changer, we think, in the fight against COVID-19. These high-quality rapid tests will help meet the huge unmet need for testing in Africa.
All the countries are called to make sure about all the process for importing and including new tests in their testing strategy. What we are advising countries to do is first on the regulatory side is to make sure that those tests are authorized to be imported in the countries and also that they are considered for post-market surveillance to make sure of their safety and of their efficacy.
And on to Somalia now, and efforts to contain desert locusts are expected to face serious challenges. A warning from the United Nations suggests the possibility of a massive buildup of swarms in new areas. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello has more now from Mogadishu.
Maslah Sharif is inspecting his farm months after a swarm of locusts destroyed most of his crops. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations is warning that more swarms are forming in nearby Ethiopia, with a new generation of laying starting in central regions of the country.
If a new wave occurs, we're concerned that we will experience a food crisis. We want the government and its partners to put an end to the locust menace.
Authorities say an increasing number of mature adult groups are moving south of the country. Parts of Mudug, Gelgadud and Hiran are some of the new hit areas. Experts say the situation will likely worsen.
The problem is not a continuous problem. It's through waves, and right now we're facing probably the fifth, sixth generation, and there are preoccupations on how this will move in the country. But Somaliland, Puntland, and the central regions are the ones that have been identified as potential problem areas, and that's the forecast so far. We don't know how far it will go down, move southwards.
In May, Mogadishu and partner UN agencies commenced an aerial campaign to curb the spread of desert locust after the federal government declared the locust infestation a national emergency. Several helicopters are currently working on control operations, spraying biopesticides in Puntland, Somaliland and Gelmudug. Environmentalists now say a long-term strategy is needed to address climate change that has been attributed as the major cause of the massive locust infestation.
We have to remember that the last time we had locust in Somalia was 25 years ago. In Ethiopia it was 30 years ago. In Kenya it was 70 years ago. So it's been a while since we last dealt with this. But if you look at the future and the climate change issues that are being brought up, it is most likely that this will happen again. Hopefully not in the future, a very immediate future, but it's a wake-up call for all of us.
Estimates indicate that up to 1.3 million people are food insecure, with 849,000 children facing acute malnutrition due to cumulative shocks. Somalia continues to suffer from climate-related shocks that have worsened overall food security. Locals now want both farmers and pastoral communities accorded enough support to shield them from environmental disasters that have become quite common in recent years. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Now, in the United States, the Senate Judiciary Committee has approved President Trump's Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. All Republican members voted yes, and 10 committee Democrats boycotted the meeting. Barrett's nomination now moves to a full Senate vote. She is a federal appeals court judge whose confirmation would give conservatives a 6-3 majority on the top judicial body. American intelligence officials say Russia and Iran are trying to interfere with the upcoming presidential election. They say both countries have obtained voter data and attempted to stir social unrest to damage U.S. President Donald Trump. The news comes just 13 days before the election, and as millions of Americans have already cast their ballots. Sarbaz Nazari has more from Tehran.
Iran's foreign ministry summoned the Swiss ambassador in Tehran. You know, in the absence of formal U.S.-Iran relations, it is the Swiss mission which represents the American government's interests here. The ambassador was told by the Iranian officials that the U.S. claims are baseless and fabricated, and that Tehran once again reiterates that it does not matter which of the two nominees will win the race. We do know this has been Iran's official line with regard to the U.S. elections, but whether or not the ordinary public shares the same opinion is something that we could doubt. I mean, is the ordinary Iranian really not monitoring the U.S. elections and its outcome? That doesn't seem to be the case. These days, many Iranians are facing the impacts of President Trump's maximum pressure policy right in their pockets, if you will. The depreciation of the national currency and the unprecedented inflation. Therefore, some argue that a Biden victory could at least alleviate part of that pressure and reopen the path for Iran-U.S. rapprochement, which of course is not a simple task, even in the case of a Biden presidency. But the overall public expectation here is that the economic strains could be relatively eased.
The news continues on Africa Live. Stay tuned. Here's what's ahead. Strict coronavirus control measures as Egyptian students troop back to school after 5 months closure. And domestic workers lose jobs and salaries as the coronavirus changes life in South Africa.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
We come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Severe flooding and landslides have devastated people across Southeast Asia. The region has been pounded by repeated storms in recent weeks. CGTN's Chuck Tente has a roundup of the damage. Let's take a look.
Severe weather conditions are not letting up in Vietnam. On Wednesday, authorities scrambled to evacuate residents from flood-prone areas, bracing for Storm Sottle, which has lashed neighboring Philippines. Sottle is expected to make landfall this weekend. This comes on top of days of heavy rains and floods that have already killed 114 people. Over 20 more are said to be missing. The flooding has also left hundreds of thousands in urgent need of aid and shelter. Authorities say further search and rescue, post-disaster recovery, and relocation of people are underway. Cambodia, particularly in the northwest, has also suffered badly from flooding in recent weeks. 19 of the kingdom's 25 cities and provinces were hit since the beginning of the month. Visiting flood regions on Wednesday, the Prime Minister said the current priority of the government is to rescue people from flood-hit areas.
Bantay Manche province suffered the worst from the flash floods. Phnom Penh was the next worst hit by rains that brought flooding.
At least 34 people there have died and over 400,000 were affected. Laos and Thailand were also not spared by floods caused by heavy rains, but according to latest reports, flood waters have been receding. Chuck Tinte, CGTN.
Schools in Egypt have reopened this week after a 5-month closure. A number of precautions have been put in place to prevent the spread of COVID-19 between students. Yasser Hakim visited one school on their first day back.
It's the first day of school for this group of students, but it's not like any other year. Parents and educators alike are anxious to keep the coronavirus out of classrooms.
Of course, any parent at the beginning is very worried about the health of their children in school. And in this situation, we have to be extra careful. I take my son's temperature before he leaves the house. We should teach them to use hand sanitizer, to not take food or take stuff from anyone else, to always wash their hands and have the awareness of the virus in everything they do.
Tamer Mahmoud, the owner of El Fardos School in Cairo, says it's a huge responsibility for management to keep facilities safe for students.
Regarding the precautions, we have social distancing between the students. We have decreasing the number of students per class. We have decreased it here in our school almost by 25% and keeping a distance of 1.5 meters to 2.5 meters between each student and the other. Some schools have applied different measures like separating the schools in 2 halves and attending 3 days and 3 days alternatively. In the meanwhile, the Ministry of Education has a collaboration with the Ministry of Health and they are doing campaigns to increase the awareness of the COVID-19 between the teachers and the students of the classes.
These health measures are not only limited to school premises, but also on school buses. As we can see, seats are kept empty between the children to ensure social distancing, and all on board should be wearing masks throughout the trip. According to government regulations, if 4 students from one class catch the virus, their class will be closed. If the virus spreads to 4 classes, then school gets shut down. Following government guidelines, schools are continuing with online education to keep students at home half the week. But Dr. Mahmoud is not a fan.
Online education can never be a replacement to face-to-face or skin-to-skin, as you say, contact between the teacher and the students. Online education is great for conveying a material, a subject, but actually we are not only teaching material, we are teaching manners, we are teaching how to interact. We are not teaching students sciences, we are teaching them how to live and how to deal with their life. Therefore, school is a very important place to be.
To ease the financial burden on parents during the COVID-19-induced recession, the government has directed all schools to receive tuition fees in 4 installments and to refund 25% of bus fees to parents. As for public school teachers and staff, they have been given a raise in salaries and bonuses. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, millions of domestic workers have been affected by the COVID-19 outbreak in South Africa. A new survey shows underemployment among domestic workers peaked during the lockdown. 80% of respondents reported that they worked fewer than 8 hours a day. 74% earned less than $150 a month, up significantly from the pre-lockdown figure of 37%. CGTN's Yulisa and Jamela spoke to a domestic worker who's been negatively affected by the lockdown.
The lockdown period dealt a serious blow to the domestic work industry. A lot of employers had to retrench their domestic workers because they had also lost their jobs or income, or their businesses had to close. A new survey by home cleaning company Sweep South paints a stark picture of the lives of those who clean homes and offices. The study attributes this to reduced spending by middle-class households due to the lockdown. The survey was conducted among some 5,000 domestic workers. Tembeka Ngobo is one of those domestic workers who were adversely affected by the lockdown. Ngobo had a full-time domestic job in one of the suburbs in Johannesburg. A few weeks into the lockdown, her employers asked her to stay at home. They told her that they could only pay her upon her return.
It was so difficult. I mean, at first, I thought the lockdown won't be so long, so I will return to work soon. Or at least, my employers will allow me to come for a few days instead of full time. Then days became weeks, then a couple of months. So it was no work, no pay. You can imagine. What does one eat? I've got family members who depend on me. So in my family, we were all desperate.
Like Ngobo, many domestic workers are the sole providers for their families. The dire financial strait that she found herself in mirrors that of the majority of domestic workers here in South Africa.
You know, even where I stay in the township, I know many people like me. We ended up just trying to help each other with whatever little we had. But as you can imagine, I was now just trying to get food for myself on a daily basis. What about the family who depend on me? I had sleepless nights just thinking about what they could possibly be eating.
Even as the lockdown eased up over months, Ngobo's employers continued to ask her to stay put. She then decided to make a temporary plan to ensure survival. In her township, she started selling food on the side of the street. She did this until her employers asked her to return about a month ago. And since then, she's had to deal with a new normal.
And I'm grateful that I was called back. Back where I stay, a lot of domestic workers have either had their work substantially reduced or they were not called back at all.
According to Statistics South Africa's 2019 Quarterly Labour Force Survey, the country has almost 1 million domestic workers. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Indiro Coffee recently launched its first sign language cafe in Uganda. The unique cafe aims to empower people with hearing impairments in the East African country. CGTN's Chao Mgono has more.
This is Indiro Coffee, a sign language cafe located in the Ugandan capital, Kampala. All of the staff have a hearing impairment and communicate using sign language. It's the first cafe of its kind in the city.
When the world sees a person with a disability or people with hearing impairments, they think those people depend on others. They think persons with disability cannot work on their own. But the first customers, in the first week, we started showing interest. They didn't know sign language, but they tried.
Customers communicate with the staff by writing down their orders.
You find a little sticky note tin with a pen in it. You also do get a form on top of the menu, so whatever I guess tickles your fancy and how you want to order. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You just write it down.
According to the Ugandan Health Ministry, over 2 million Ugandans suffer a degree of hearing loss.
My dream is to see deaf people empowered, economically empowered through coffee. I believe this business is going to give deaf people jobs as we expand.
The cafe opened its doors to customers last month and has ensured that COVID-19 safety precautions are well observed.
We're all struggling in this period, but by brewing all the good we can, we're offering
great opportunity for the vulnerable community to, get leadership, get opportunities to work. So yes, so bold move, but bring all the good you can requires bold moves.
Indira Coffee hopes to create more intimate spaces like this one across Uganda. Chamgono, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. Time now for our business segment with Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. South Africa's power outages are expected to persist until 2021. And Ghana says that structures have been put in place to take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidu. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Well, let's start off in South Africa. The country's power utility Eskom says that load shedding will remain a major concern, at least until mid-2021. Now, the state-owned entity was providing an update of its systems and constraints. Here's Angelo Coppola with that story.
The utility says that it's had some time during lockdown to tackle a portion of its maintenance backlog.
But this is not yet enough to eliminate entirely the risk of load shedding. There is also more work that needs to be done, but we anticipate that by September of this year we will have performed adequate reliability maintenance to have significantly reduced, but sadly not eliminated, the risk of load shedding.
Some analysts are impressed with the manner in which the new management team has tackled the current situation, despite the legacy issues they face.
We can see here a management team that knows what they're doing, that understands the issues, that can communicate them very effectively. And I was left very heartened by this appreciation that they show to the issues that they face and how they're going to deal with them.
Others are not that impressed, suggesting that the utility isn't being as transparent as it should be when it comes to the status of the power station fleet.
They blame the old plant repeatedly for unreliability and breakdowns and all sorts of nonsense.
And today they give us a statistic that their best performing plant is, has been running for 104 days without trips, and that's Komati. It's probably the oldest power station in the fleet.
The organisation has also been under pressure to reduce its strong staff complement, as many experts believe that it's bloated.
At the end of the past financial year, the headcount came in at about 44,000 employees. This was achieved through a recruitment freeze. As you've seen, we've been very deliberate in not losing key and critical skills as a result of the recruitment freeze. So it has been a focused but also very deliberate effort to reduce headcount without impacting operations.
Perhaps the biggest issue facing Eskom at the moment is its financial woes, and those details will only become apparent towards the end of the month when their financial results are released. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And Ghana's Minister for Trade and Industry, Alan Kyerematen, says that the country is ready to take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, he says the government has rolled out the necessary structures to facilitate the takeoff in January next year. Kyerematen also added that institutional frameworks have been established to ensure private companies benefit from the Intra-Africa Trade Agreement. Of course, Ghana hopes that the deal will lead to increased agricultural, industrial, financial and scientific partnerships. The trade agreement makes Africa the largest free trade area in the world, with a population of 1.2 billion people and a total GDP of more than $3.4 trillion US. Well, let's head now to China. The country's vice premier, Liu He, said on Wednesday that the country's decision to contain the pandemic before restoring its economy was, in quotes, perfectly right. He was speaking at the Financial Street Forum in Beijing, saying that it's highly probable that China will register positive growth this year. And that's because key economic indicators are improving quarter by quarter. Liu added that the Chinese economy is witnessing some new trends. Those include more emphasis on new industries and additional attention to green development. Liu also reiterated China's determination to advance an all-round opening up of its economy. Now, the governor of China's central bank, Yi Gang, and senior banking and securities regulators also spoke at that Financial Street Forum. They detailed plans for future policy moves. Let's take a listen.
Monetary policy must maintain a balance between stable economic growth and risk prevention. Neither let the market be short of money nor allow money to overflow from the market. Keep the money supply basically matching the growth rate of nominal GDP, which reflects potential output. We should implement normal monetary policy for as long as possible and maintain a normal upward sloping yield curve.
Financial institutions should give full play to their professional advantages, do a good job in wealth management, increase residents' property income, and realize the long-term growth of people's wealth. In the meantime, financial institutions should also prevent risk spillover, maintain market stability, and improve social welfare.
We will steadily promote an open and transparent registration-based IPO system throughout the capital market, based on our experience from the piloting of the STAR market and the Chinex board. We will also modify the information disclosure rules to meet investors' needs, set up diversified and inclusive conditions for companies to qualify for listing, and improve the insurance and underwriting mechanisms.
Well, let's now turn our attention to the latest IMF report. The International Monetary Fund says that GDP in the Asia-Pacific region will shrink by about 2.2% in 2020. That's because the coronavirus pandemic hit China, South Korea, and Japan quite hard earlier on. The region has since been praised for its response to the crisis. Giles Gibson reports from Washington.
The IMF says 2020 will see Asia's most severe contraction in generations, the region where the coronavirus emerged before wreaking havoc across the globe. China, though, is expected to be the only major economy in the world to grow this year.
China, which suffered the blow from the pandemic earlier than other countries,
has seen a very strong recovery since the first quarter lockdown, and growth has now been revised up to 1.9% this year, a rare positive figure in a sea of negatives.
But the IMF says India's economy, another of the region's major players, will contract by more than 10% in 2020. India could also soon overtake the US as the country with the most coronavirus cases in the world.
Throughout this year's annual meetings, the IMF and World Bank have repeatedly urged leaders to work together to fight the virus, including making a potential vaccine available to every single country at an affordable price.
And the IMF says world leaders should also study how some countries in Asia have responded to COVID-19.
Relaxing containment measures only after the virus has been suppressed, and with appropriate complementary policies, such as broad testing and contact tracing capacity, seems to be associated with better economic outcomes. On both counts, Asia has done well in comparison to other regions.
Off the back of that response, the IMF is forecasting the Asia-Pacific region will rebound into solid growth in 2021. But it also sees major risks looming on the horizon, including trade tensions between the US and China and a potential resurgence of the coronavirus. Giles Gibson for CGTN in Washington.
Now, the IMF is also calling on European leaders to maintain financial support for businesses and workers as a second wave of COVID-19 hits much of the EU. The fund also says that Europe has managed to save millions of jobs through employment retention schemes, but it also says that now isn't the time to wind back those programs. Here's Trent Murray reporting from Frankfurt.
Heading in the right direction, but still more to do. That's the message from the International Monetary Fund when it comes to Europe's economic response to the COVID-19 crisis. The IMF's Regional Director for Europe, Alfred Kummer, says the economic hit has been enormous. The IMF is predicting a 7% decline in Europe's GDP this year. Now, they do say it will rebound by 4.7% next year, but that's still well below their pre-pandemic forecast of 6.3%. Now, it is important to note that this revised economic update comes at a time where much of Europe is facing tighter restrictions as a result of the resurgence of coronavirus. The last 6 months have shown that forced lockdowns can act like a sledgehammer to growth as businesses shut up shop and unemployment grows. The IMF says it's doing its best to incorporate renewed restrictions into its modelling. But I asked Mr. Kummer, with the situation changing so rapidly, just how difficult is it to make those forecasts, as well as whether any European governments have called for the IMF's help in understanding the impact of a second lockdown on their respective economies?
In these circumstances, actually, we rely very much on epidemiologists, on how to model the pandemic and how these, the virus response is going to evolve, and we are then building the bridge. So our forecast in the VO and in the RIO, we are using these models, and we are discussing, of course, our projections with the our partners when we are making these forecasts, and we are sharing our models with them.
While the IMF has high praise for what it calls Europe's unprecedented policy response to the crisis so far, it does stress that governments shouldn't withdraw their economic support prematurely. Trent Murray, CGTN, Frankfurt.
Now, some positive news from that IMF report. It has revised upwards growth projections for Egypt. The lender says the North African nation will achieve a 3.5% economic growth this year, and that's from an earlier projection of 2% made in June. From Cairo, here is Yasser Hakim with more details.
More positive news on Egypt's economic performance during the corona pandemic. The country has naturally faced a drop in revenue, a huge strain on the budget, and economic growth half of the pre-COVID 6% target. Yet results so far are better than most countries in the continent and the region.
In my view, the main success came as Egyptian financial institutions and the government worked hand in hand to take a balanced approach to the outbreak of the virus. a partial lockdown was placed. At the same time, production went into full throttle while maintaining health procedures to keep the economy open. This was unlike many countries in Europe or the US or Turkey that did not manage to balance both sides early on, which led to acute contraction of the economies.
The Deutsche Bank report says the growth is supported by government spending, an expansion in the ICT and energy sectors, growth in net exports, and the mega construction and infrastructure projects funded by the state.
If we look at Egypt, there are a variety of sources of revenue that create growth for the economy. The Suez Canal, tourism, aviation, industries, service sectors, expatriate remittances, treasury bills. It's a variety that can sustain you in a recession, unlike some economies that depend on one source, such as petroleum or oil and gas. If it drops, the economy breaks down.
Direct foreign investments have increased as well by 11% year-on-year amidst the pandemic, raking in more hard currency. Going forward, the IMF and Deutsche Bank reports have agreed that Egypt will continue a gradual recovery as growth rates would reach 5.8% by 2025. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but still to come on Global Business Africa, we'll be delving further into the IMF's report on Africa. It says it is confident of an economic recovery for the region as early as the second half of 2020. More on that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you.
Thank you so much, Uche. The news continues. We've got a lot more coming your way. Here's a look at what's ahead. A South African artist captures the love and emotions triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic.
L'Afrique, à nouveau secouée par le démon du coup d'État.
Mais il était tellement puissant qu'on ne peut pas l'écarter. Il faut l'éliminer physiquement. Il a été froidement abattu, sans résistance.
You got Thomas Sankara everywhere.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. The Awladna Festival is an annual gathering of children with special needs organized by the Awladna Forum. The forum is aimed at improving the skills of the children and helping them integrate more with society. Yasser Hakim has more from the festival that took place this week.
It's in its fourth year, and the theme this year is Talents on Show.
There's a lot of variety this time. The children were on stage with singers Anushka and Black Tima. Others acted a play with actors, and a lot of talent was evident. 5 government ministers attended the festival this year under the president's auspices. It shows how far we've come by creating awareness about these children.
The kids were nicknamed the Gifted during the 3-day event. They showcased their talent in music performances, folklore dancing, and singing.
I sang with the group Black Time. I also have a medal in table tennis, and my mother encourages me to be active all the time and do different things.
Travel restrictions due to the coronavirus have prevented foreign delegations from attending this year. However, this has not affected the excitement of the children.
These forum and festival have completely transformed my daughter Hadil and all the children. It has given them so much positive energy. They were secluded before and unwillingly to socialize with the community. Now they are confident and feel they can contribute to the society.
On the last day of the event, an art exhibition was set up displaying the paintings of the children with special needs, and trophies were delivered to them in recognition of their development. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
A lot of artists are starting to showcase the unique body of work that they produced during the lockdown period. Most of them used the lockdown to capture this period in history and also draw on the sense of fear, loneliness, and isolation that has been felt across the board. In Johannesburg, South Africa, at the Everard Reed Gallery, artist Wayne Barker is showcasing an exhibition called Love Light in the Time of Corona. CGTN's Ulysses and Jamila has more.
Packed with symbolism, history, innuendo, and pop culture, this exhibition is a critical reminder of the complexities of emptiness and offers a glimmer of salvation in the collective humanity. That's according to the exhibiting artist Wayne Barker. Barker is showcasing a body of work themed Love Light in the Time of Corona.
You know, I'd been invited to have a residency in Paris, and the lockdown happened, and suddenly I packed up my whole massive big studio, and I was left with very little material in my apartment studio. So the first thing I started doing was just painting lilies, and thinking about lilies and light. And then over time, with the limited material that I had, I thought, well, the social distancing, suddenly you can't see your friends, you can't see anybody. And the angst that I think everyone went through, I mean, no one knew what the hell is going on.
Barker says during this pandemic time, he has shifted his focus away from his critical, broader observations on society at large and began to paint portraits of the people around him.
These portraits speak to the private moments, the fears and the uncertainties, but they also speak to the strength of humankind.
So the portraits came out of a very intense, I'm quite a prolific artist. I work a lot. Doesn't all end up in museums or galleries or whatever, but it's like healing in a way. I find the process of art making incredibly healing for the self.
The exhibition also reflects on the fact that the whole world has been permanently altered in the last 6 months as a result of the need to curb the spread of COVID-19. And yet, the fundamental needs of human beings remain unchanged.
I was actually reflecting my own angst and quite a lot of things. Like, I was thinking about the world, about, ownership, about suddenly you're left with basically nothing. And you're there, sure, you can shop, you can do the very basic things. And it was an interesting journey to see what is actually important in one's life. Like, it doesn't matter if you've got a massive mansion, you're not going to be able to, you know what I mean? Like, or the big car, or whatever.
Barker is well known for his bold, critical, social and political commentary. The exhibition is on display until the end of October. Ulysses and Jamila for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And we've got your sports news coming up after the break. Let's take a peek at that headline.